Joining us right now in the Hyundai Texans Radio studio, it's Nick Caserio, Texans General Manager. Nick, week one, here we go. A lot of excitement in the building.
Good morning. Happy game week.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So excited about the opportunity here on Sunday. So I think the team will be ready to go. Big challenge in front of us. So we'll have to play good football.
Nick, we talked a little bit about the Colts last week, but now we can really dive in. And a player that interests me in a good way and a bad way is Grover Stewart for the Colts. We all know about DeForest Buckner. We know about Shaquille Leonard. But Grover Stewart sort of flies under the radar. He got a second contract from the Colts. I think it's a guy that Chris really believes in, that defense really believes in. How much of a problem does he become in the middle?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say probably is a player that kind of helps solidify their front, kind of slow start to his career, but has turned into a really good player. I think what makes him unique is for how big he is, 6'6", 340. He's a big man, but he's very athletic for his size. So his length, his playing strength, he's got good quickness. So when you pair that with a player like Buckner on the interior of their defense, like they want to be strong in the middle of the defense, and those are two players that give them the opportunity to do that.
Nick, we always talk draft with you and players coming out of college, but you guys scout all the teams in the league here. And Matt Ryan, veteran, 37 years old, and you evaluated him coming out of college too. What do you make of his career, the trajectory, and what he brings to the Colts?
Yeah, he's had a great career. There's no question about it. So he's been a very consistent player, very dependable player, very durable player. I mean, he's been on the field essentially every game that he's played. So it speaks to his preparation and speaks to his toughness. He's a very skilled player, very accurate, and I want to say he's around 65% career completion percentage, which for a quarterback is really good. So makes good decisions, anticipates well, instinctive, smart with the ball. He's very, very tough. So for a player that doesn't necessarily move a lot, he's more of a pocket thrower, but he's very tough. He knows how to move within the pocket, and he can deliver the ball under stress and under duress. So I think they're excited about what he potentially could bring to their offense. So it's certainly going to be a challenge for our defense, no question about it.
Nick, 2 years after the fact, I'm still trying to figure out how Jonathan Taylor got to the second round and then how he got to the Indianapolis Colts, which I hate all those teams that decided to pass on him. So he could go to Indianapolis, and now he's turned into arguably one of the top 5 players in the league, arguably the top running back in the league. Why does he create such issues for defenses?
Yeah, I mean, really, he does everything well. He's big. He's 225, 230 pounds, and he's fast. So when you put that combination together, and he's instinctive, and he's got a good running style, good lower body strength, and if you give him any space, which unfortunately we saw that in our games last year, if you give him any space, he gets into the space so quickly, and then he's got really good top-end speed and acceleration. So if you don't have enough speed in the second, third level of defense, he's just going to run away from you. So we're going to have to make sure, tackling is going to be at a premium. I know Lovey's talked about that a little bit here during the course of the week, but tackling is going to be at the premium, getting multiple hats to the ball. You just can't give him any space. So the run fits and leveraging the ball are going to be important against their offense. And I know we're talking a lot about Taylor, but Hines presents as many problems, so it's a good 1-2 punch. So they really complement each other well. They're both fast. Naheem isn't as big as Jonathan, but he's equally as fast and explosive. So when those two players are on the field, it potentially puts the defense in conflict. But they're two really good players, and we're going to have to contend with them, no question about it.
Well, it's an interesting offense to evaluate because Phillip Rivers 2 years ago, Carson Wentz last year, and now you have Matt Ryan. How are they different, you think, or is it all still a Frank Reich project and it's going to be very similar?
Yeah, this is Frank and Coach Brady, so they had the system's been in place here for a number of years, and I think what they try to do is modify to their offense to whoever is playing quarterback, but I'd say there's a lot of similarities between Phillip and Matt. I don't want to say they're the same player, and even Carson to some extent. Carson maybe a little bit more athletic, had a little better movement skills, but they're all big, they're all strong. They all are tough. They play from the pocket. So they have their system in place. I think there's going to be some things that they're going to do regardless of who's playing quarterback. Starts with the running game. Pittman's emerged as a really good young player. They drafted Pierce in the second round. They've used Doolin at different points. So they have, I would say, they're explosive offensively, and they can score from anywhere on the field. So I think big plays, tackling will be at a premium just in terms of preventing those from a defensive side of the ball.
They've added, like you said, Pierce. They've added a few rookies. They haven't added much in a lot of other places except for one guy that you actually know pretty well out at corner. Xavier Rhodes out. Stephon Gilmore steps into that spot, and watching him during the preseason, okay, that's the Gilmore that we all know. What kind of problem does he present, Nick, Stephon Gilmore out on the outside for the Colts now?
Yeah, Steph's a really good player. He's got good length, 6 foot, 190 pounds. He runs well. He's a very instinctive player. Like, he understands football. He understands splits. He understands receivers, and he plays the ball well. And he's very competitive, despite his, I would say, demeanor and how he articulates his thoughts. He's a really good kid. He's a good football player. Kind of had some injuries that he had to deal with over the last few years. But to your point, John, he looks like he's healthy and ready to go. So they added him, and the addition of Faison is kind of one of those under the radar types of things. So Brandon has experience in Gus's system, so he's with him in San Diego and L.A., and he was with him in Vegas. So those two players fit the profile of what they want on the perimeter. They like the big, long corners that can run, and then Kenny's been as consistent a player at his position as they're in the league over the last however many years. So they're good in the secondary. They're good on the front line, and then they drafted Cross in the 3rd round, who's big, he's fast, he's tough. So they had essentially replaced Willis with Cross. You know, the unforeseen retirement of Willis there in the offseason, but they probably anticipated that there a little bit with the drafting of Cross. So they've gotten younger. They've added some new players to go along with some of the existing players on their team, and schematically they'll do some things that are specific to Gus's system, but they're certainly going to present some problems for our offense on the defensive side of the ball.
Nick, you've been watching all these game planning practices, and without sharing all the secrets, what about the Texans' offensive identity? Because here is a game one situation, element of surprise, and they want to establish that identity however it's going to play out very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, running the football, regardless of who you play on a week-to-week basis. So being able to run the ball, being able to stop the run, that's going to be at a premium here this week. So I think this will be a good opportunity for us offensively. It's all about execution. It's all about getting to manageable down and distance situations, being able to execute on 3rd down, and then hopefully when we get the ball into the red area, scoring touchdowns. So there's a lot of elements that we're going to see. We saw some of those elements last year. Turnovers are always going to be a factor. You go back and look at the game last year, it's 10-3 at halftime, then we throw the interception, then you get the big play for a touchdown, and before you know it spirals out of control, and the game gets out of hand. So just want to make sure that you control the game as best we can, limit the big plays from their offense, and try to create some big plays offensively, and try to be good in the running game on both sides of the ball.
Nick, I think last week we touched a little bit on your waiver claim of Tyler Johnson, who came from the Buccaneers. I know we didn't talk about O.J. Howard being added. What are your thoughts? We'll get to thoughts about Tyler as well, but O.J. and Tyler being added to the passing game, how does that impact the offense?
Yeah, both experienced players have had varying levels of production regardless of where they've been. I mean, O.J. was a good player there in Tampa Bay for a number of years, and he had the injury in 2020, I believe it was. So, and then 21 kind of slowed him a little bit, but big, strong, runs well. Tyler's had some production, has good size. I'd say he's a decent run after catch player. So the big thing will be in a short period of time whether or not we can get those players acclimated to our system, whether or not we can get them ready to play. They're obviously not going to be able to handle the entire offense, but you're into more of a game plan specific type thing. So certain things that may be more relevant than others. So we'll see if we can get them ready to play, and we'll work through the week to see who's actually going to be available come game time.
Nick, pre-COVID, and it's hard to imagine that a year ago we were still in testing mode all the time and everything, but pre-COVID, Tuesdays were a big day for players to come around to different teams around the league and try out. How is that working now, and what do you get out of that? Is that to keep the Rolodex fresh with information on potential players if you do need them?
Yeah, that's probably the big thing, Mark. So you kind of have a familiarity with most players, and we've gone through the preseason, so there's been a number of players that have been on rosters that have been released. And it's not necessarily, I would say, position-specific or geared towards a specific player. It's more to kind of get a general mosaic of players and get more information and either confirm the information that we have, or maybe we find something different, or maybe we find we have a better option. So you're always trying to prepare for the what if. So if we lose someone, what's our next option? So I would say in the interim, the first option is the practice squad. Okay, if we don't have a player at that respective position on the practice squad, what's the alternative? And we'll probably have a decent amount of movement on and off the practice squad. So if you're replacing a player, who are you replacing them with? So I would say the first month or so, 4 to 6 weeks, well, the volume is probably higher. I mean, league-wide, I would say ourselves included. Then once we kind of get through the first 3 or 4 weeks, probably have a pretty good idea who's available, and we'll be able to plug a hole if necessary.
Nick, as you prepare for a game, you prepare so many different ways, so many situations, first, second down, third down. What are you doing fourth down? How do you handle end-of-half, end-of-game situations? I was actually reading an article this morning I thought was interesting about University of Houston. They went into overtime the other day against UTSA, and they'd done a study on overtime about taking the ball first or playing defense first. And I thought it was pretty interesting from that standpoint because you don't play a ton of overtime games, but college you have to attack it a certain way. Is overtime something that you look at as a particular situation that you put studies into, analytics into, how you go about overtime? Because it has changed over the years. How do you kind of attack overtime, and how do you look at and perceive it?
Yeah, no, there's strategy involved in essentially all phases. So once you kind of get past early downs, essentially each game is situational football. So it's about third down, it's about red area, it's about end of half, it's about 4 minutes, about short yardage and goal line. If you do happen to get into overtime, what's your philosophy? Who's the opponent? Who are you playing? So we allocate a lot of time and resources into understanding kind of what's going on, what are other teams doing, what are some of the things that we might want to implement. We'll talk about them as a staff and just make sure we're prepared. So if we are in that situation, we kind of have an idea of how we want to handle it.
So you're not going to tell us what your preference is for the format. It's okay. Let me ask you this, though, because obviously we had 3 preseason games. The starters didn't play the entirety of any game, but a lot more in the third game. And I'm watching college football this weekend, Nick, and there's some definite situations that come up that it seems like they weren't completely ready for. You're having some week 1 rust, if you will. Is there week 1 rust in the NFL, despite the fact that you have preseason games? When you look at the data year to year?
Yeah, really, I mean, it's a new opportunity for all of us. So none of us have played a game. None of us have coached in a game. None of us have played a full game. So adjusting to the game. In week 1, there's always going to be things that pop up that maybe you didn't anticipate and didn't prepare for. The ability to adjust and react during the course of the game is the most important thing. You'll have an idea how the game is going to declare in the first quarter on both sides of the ball. The kicking game will be the kicking game. So once you have a feel for how the game is being played, then you can kind of play out the rest of the game. But really, each play, you're going from first down to second down to third down to fourth down. There's a new situation that comes up essentially on every play. You don't know when it's going to come up. You don't know what situation is going to come up. End of half, you're trying to run the clock out, or you're trying to kick a field goal. So you sort of have to prepare and then be able to react and adapt to what goes on during the course of the game.
Nick, I know you watch college games with a different eye because you look at it from an evaluation point. But this weekend, and I think it happens every single weekend in college football because it's the day before pro games, I'm asking this question. Have there been times when you see something in a college game and go, whoa, we maybe need like a 5-minute primer with our guys right before the game to say, hey, this happened in this game. We need, not that we need to be aware of it, but just be conscious of the fact that this might happen. There's so many of them that happened. The North Carolina Appalachian State game where the kid ran back the onside kick and gave Appalachian State a chance. You ever have those opportunities to kind of sit down and say, hey, wait a second, this happened. We need to be alert for this?
No, it's a relevant point. It probably happens more once we kind of get through the weekend. So you'll go back and look at some of the games, and we'll look at some situational plays, look at some of the big plays, look at some of the things that came up. Maybe there's an application to what we're doing or maybe an application to the NFL. But just when you go back and look at this past weekend of college football, the biggest difference in the games was a kicking game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everybody talks about the importance of special teams, and it manifests itself in college football. So we put a big emphasis on the kicking game here. I would say the Colts are probably as good as special teams unit we're going to face in the league. I think when you look at Gosselin's rankings last year, Rick is very well respected. I think the Colts were second. So they do a good job in the kicking game. I mean, Bubba was a good player in the kicking game. That was his career, and he's done a good job putting together. They have some really good core players in E.J. Speed. They traded for Grant Stewart. They allocate a lot of time and resources to that particular phase. So the kicking game is going to win or lose games. At some point, you just don't want to lose it, in a situation where you could have prevented something negative from happening.
What about being in the building on Sunday, Nick, with the fans coming in, regular season situation, Liberty White kickoff, all of that? I know that you're really focused on what is happening between the lines, but it's going to be quite an atmosphere.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of excitement and anticipation for this game. It's Liberty White, so I mean that brings its own kind of unique sort of circumstances. But I know Lovey's talked about this from day one, so the fans are important. We're going to need the fans. We're playing at home. It's a good opportunity for us. Hopefully get off to a good start, and our goal is to try to put a good product out there that everybody can be proud of and cheer for. So it'll be fun. I think everybody is excited about Sunday and being able to get on the field and actually play some football.
All right, everybody goes to a particular musical choice before kickoff.
Not me.
Do you have one, or are you just total, complete silence?
On your drive to the stadium, is it a talk show? Is it
complete
music?
silence?
What is it?
No, my drive to the stadium. Actually, my wife and I kind of have our own little Sunday routine. So we drive to the stadium together. She drops me off. So after the game, we can go home together. So honestly, we're just kind of having like a nice conversation about nothing related to football. So
It's not like
try to keep it as normal as possible.
I mean, if you had dropped like Dan Campbell, Metallica, that would have been a little
I got to hear
weird.
Motley Crue right now.
No, I think everybody, whatever their game day routine is, so
Yeah.
it's kind of get to the stadium, get a workout in, get some work done, and kind of get prepared, and just try to maintain some level of stability here before the game gets rolling.
All right, looking forward to it. Nick, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to know when we post new content.